You know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of something massive, something that's about to completely reshape everything you thought you knew about your life. It's not excitement exactly, and it's not fear either. It's something deeper, something that sits in your chest like a quiet knowing that refuses to be ignored. If you're watching this right now, if something pulled you here in this exact moment, it's because you're standing at that edge. You're not just stumbling through another random day of scrolling and searching for something to fill the emptiness. You're here because something inside you recognizes what's happening. You're entering a new chapter, and your soul knows it, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Here's what nobody tells you about new chapters. They don't announce themselves with fanfare or dramatic music. They don't wait for you to feel ready or prepared or confident about what's coming next. New chapters begin in the quiet spaces, in those moments when you realize you can't keep pretending that where you are is where you belong. They start when you finally stop trying to make the old story work and admit that something fundamental has shifted inside you. Maybe it happened gradually. Maybe you've been feeling restless for months, like you're wearing clothes that don't fit anymore. Maybe conversations that used to energize you now feel hollow. Maybe goals that used to drive you now feel meaningless. Maybe relationships that used to fulfill you now feel like performances you're tired of giving. Or maybe it happened all at once, in a single moment of clarity that cut through years of confusion and showed you exactly what you've been avoiding. Either way, you're here now. And being here means you've crossed an invisible threshold that most people never even see, let alone have the courage to step through. You've moved from unconscious living to conscious choosing, from drifting to directing, from reacting to creating. And that shift, that movement from one way of being to another, that's what a new chapter actually is. But let me tell you what this new chapter isn't. It's not about becoming someone completely different or abandoning everything you've built. It's not about running away from your problems or escaping into some fantasy version of yourself. New chapters aren't about external transformation. They're about internal recognition. They're about finally seeing what was always true, but buried under layers of conditioning and expectation and fear. You've probably noticed things changing in ways you can't quite explain. Maybe you're making different choices without really thinking about it. Maybe you're drawn to different people, different conversations, different experiences. Maybe you're losing interest in things that used to consume your attention. Maybe you're finding yourself in situations you never would have sought out before, having thoughts you never would have entertained, feeling emotions you thought you'd outgrown. This isn't random. This isn't chaos. This is reorganization. When you enter a new chapter, your entire system starts recalibrating to match who you're becoming. Your values shift. Your priorities rearrange themselves. Your tolerance for certain kinds of energy changes completely. What used to feel normal now feels suffocating. What used to feel impossible now feels inevitable. And here's where most people get scared and try to go back. They mistake this reorganization for instability. They think something's wrong with them because they're changing. They try to force themselves back into the old patterns, the old ways of thinking, the old relationships and routines that no longer fit. They convince themselves that consistency means staying the same forever, that growth is somehow a betrayal of who they used to be. But new chapters don't work that way. You can't enter a new chapter and remain exactly who you were in the last one. That's not evolution. That's stagnation. And your soul didn't bring you this far to let you stagnate. It brought you here to expand, to explore, to become more of who you actually are, underneath all the stories you've been telling yourself about who you're supposed to be. The thing is, new chapters require different skills than old chapters. They require different ways of thinking, different ways of being, different ways of relating to yourself and the world around you. And if you're trying to navigate this new chapter with the same tools you used in the last one, you're going to feel lost. You're going to feel like nothing makes sense anymore. You're going to feel like you're failing at something you can't even name. That's not failure. That's learning. That's what it looks like when someone who's been walking their entire life suddenly realizes they need to learn how to swim. The skills that got you here won't get you where you're going. The mindset that worked in your last chapter might be completely useless in this one. The people who supported your growth before might not understand the direction you're growing now. And this is where it gets interesting, because new chapters don't just change what you do, they change how you see. They change what you notice, what you prioritize, what you consider possible. They change the questions you ask and the answers you're willing to accept. They change your relationship with uncertainty, with discomfort, with the unknown. In your old chapter, you probably needed to know exactly where you were going before you took the first step. You needed guarantees and assurances and detailed plans. You needed other people's approval and understanding. You needed to feel confident and prepared and ready for whatever was coming next. But this new chapter operates on different principles entirely. This chapter asks you to move before you feel ready, to trust before you have proof, to commit before you have clarity, to become before you know exactly what you're becoming. This chapter asks you to develop a completely different relationship with the unknown, to see uncertainty not as something to be avoided, but as something to be embraced. Because here's what you're discovering, whether you realize it or not. The unknown isn't empty. It's not a void waiting to swallow you up. The unknown is pregnant with possibility. It's where all potential lives. It's where everything you've been asking for has been waiting for you to become ready to receive it. And ready doesn't mean what you think it means. Ready doesn't mean having all the answers, or feeling completely confident, or knowing exactly what to expect. Ready means being willing to not know. Ready means being willing to be surprised. Ready means being willing to let this new chapter teach you things your old chapter never could. This is why you're here. This is why something inside you recognized these words. Because you're not just entering any new chapter. You're entering the chapter where you finally stop trying to control the story and start letting the story unfold through you. The chapter where you stop being the narrator and start being the story itself. And that shift, that movement from trying to direct the experience to allowing yourself to be the experience, that's where everything you've been searching for has been waiting. You've probably spent most of your life believing that you needed to figure everything out first, that you needed to have a plan, a strategy, a roadmap that would guarantee success before you could take any meaningful action. That's how the old chapter worked. That was the game you learned to play, the rules you mastered, the system that made sense in a world where everything felt predictable and controllable. But this new chapter doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't respond to your strategies. It doesn't operate according to the rules you've spent years memorizing. This chapter runs on something completely different. It runs on trust. It runs on intuition. It runs on a kind of knowing that doesn't come from your head, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere that's been quietly watching and waiting for you to finally listen. And listening, real listening, that's a skill your old chapter never taught you. In your old chapter, listening meant waiting for your turn to speak. It meant analyzing what you heard so you could respond appropriately. It meant filtering everything through your existing beliefs and assumptions and fears to determine whether it was safe or useful or worth paying attention to. But in this new chapter, listening means something entirely different. It means creating space inside yourself for information that doesn't fit your current understanding. It means being willing to be changed by what you hear, instead of just collecting evidence for what you already think you know. It means developing the capacity to receive guidance from sources you've never trusted before. Your body, for instance. Your body has been trying to communicate with you for years, sending you signals about what feels right and what doesn't, what energizes you and what drains you, what aligns with your truth and what pulls you away from it. But your old chapter taught you to override those signals, to push through discomfort, to ignore your instincts in favor of logic and reason and what other people expected from you. This new chapter asks you to remember that your body is not just a vehicle carrying your consciousness around. Your body is consciousness. Your body is intelligence. Your body knows things your mind hasn't figured out yet. And learning to trust what your body is telling you, learning to let it guide your decisions instead of just analyzing everything to death, that's one of the fundamental skills this new chapter requires. The same goes for your emotions. Your old chapter probably taught you that emotions were inconvenient interruptions to rational thinking, that they were obstacles to overcome or problems to solve, or weaknesses to hide, that the goal was to achieve some kind of emotional equilibrium where you felt good all the time and never had to deal with anything uncomfortable or challenging or unclear. But emotions aren't interruptions. They're information. They're your internal guidance system, responding to the energy of different situations, different people, different possibilities. They're telling you what's aligned and what isn't, what's expanding you and what's contracting you, what's moving you toward your truth and what's pulling you away from it. In this new chapter, you don't try to control your emotions or fix them or make them more convenient. You learn to feel them fully, to let them move through you, to extract the information they're carrying without getting lost in the story they're telling. You realize that every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, is trying to serve your growth in some way. Fear, for example. Your old chapter taught you that fear was something to avoid, something that meant you were doing something wrong, or dangerous, or foolish. But in this new chapter, you start to understand that fear often points toward exactly what you need to do next, not because you should ignore legitimate dangers, but because most of the fear you feel isn't about real threats. It's about growth. It's your system's way of alerting you that you're approaching the edge of your comfort zone, the boundary between who you've been and who you're becoming. And crossing those boundaries, moving beyond those edges, that's how new chapters unfold. Not through dramatic leaps or sudden transformations, but through a series of small choices to trust something larger than your limited perspective, to say yes when your conditioning says no, to move forward when your old programming says stay put, to choose expansion when contraction feels safer. This is why this new chapter feels so different from anything you've experienced before. It's not just asking you to do different things, it's asking you to be different, to operate from a different center, to make decisions from a different place, to relate to uncertainty and change and growth from a completely different foundation. You're not the same person who started watching this video, and you never will be again. That's not something to mourn or resist. That's something to celebrate. Because the version of yourself that brought you here, the one that recognized something shifting, the one that was brave enough to listen when your soul started whispering about new possibilities, that version did their job perfectly. They got you to this moment. Now it's time to let this new chapter show you who you're becoming. Trust the process, trust the journey, trust yourself. Your new chapter is already writing itself through you.